I can shut that off if you don't want that on.
Probably turn this one off.
Either that or set it so I can see the people. See everybody back there.
Should I send out an email to everybody?
Good.
What?
Live streaming?
There's like a 20-second delay.
Yeah, that's
So I'd encourage them to email you questions.
yeah.
And then encourage people who are talking
have a,
to use the mic.
Yes.
And then it'll come out
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like an email. No.
No. You're up Thursday.
Okay.
Gosh, this will change back.
Oh, excellent. Sign-in sheet.
Excellent, thank you.
Like, you're supposed to respond to me, not just. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about?
I love it. Great set. I even like better when I don't have to be
Where are you presenting from? Are you gonna be at the diocese or?
right here.
I think just like walking around.
Or just.
I wear a big red shirt, but I'm gonna be a hard target.
But if you can hold the mic.
I can hold the mic.
Yeah. Whoever's presenting, try to use a mic and then.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any questions, we'll see. Is there 2 mics?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll maybe
Yeah.
Nellie be a runner. If there's any questions.
Robin, if you're listening, can you send me an email? Make sure it's coming through, okay? Van Valkenburg.
Robin? I thought he was gonna come.
I don't think so.
So is it just like
He
BCAG on
RSVP'd
YouTube?
if you don't know.
Is it BCAG YouTube?
It's on our website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get it here. Oh, stand up time.
I should go through this real quick with you.
So you can use that to advance
Get through the
it.
slides, but it's mostly not slides.
And then if you want to do what you got to do, just go that way.
Thank you. Okay, there it is. Did you got the file open? We have all these things that we. Sorry, no problem.
Step away.
So you can see right there. Can you come this way?
Yeah, then there's the camera right there.
Yeah. So you can see how long, if we stand over here.
Okay, that's all set.
We're still over there.
It should change. I'm going to have it go half presentation, half room.
Yeah. It's
Signature page, website.
45. bathrooms are down the hall to the left.
What? What about me sitting here?
Nothing. Hello.
Hello.
You set? I think you guys are all set up. There you go.
I'll hang out. How's my work? No worries.
Sweet.
It'll be out this afternoon. They're waiting for
What
signatures.
they're seeing on the stream, and I know I feel bad that they'll get to see it like half the room and half the presentation.
Oh, that's
For those
okay.
who are not, but yeah,
That's
I know it'd be
fine.
nice if we were recording.
Yeah. I'm sure somehow like you could probably find it on there.
Alone
Outlook.
today?
Probably like in some more data center.
Yeah.
It's a IT thing.
Yeah.
I'm not an IT person.
Thank you for your help.
Can't reach this one.
You too.
Doggone it. By the way, I think ARB removed their map.
Why?
I don't know. Mar. ARB removed the map. Probably. It'd be really nice though if we'd get a call and not surprise.
Click on it
My feed.
and remove the low income. And then yeah, and maybe they change the
Go
extension.
sit on the dais. Go sit on the dais.
Didn't want to go to any of this. Oh, that's still the same thing. I have to do it this way.
Did you go to the stip hearings? Yeah, we just presented and left. I think it went well. What are you asking for?
It does.
Something was wrong with ARB.
Yeah. Because this
Did
is
we
up.
have a printout of one of the maps on the samples? Did you add a?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it looks
it's
good.
there.
It's
So
good.
I'll be able to go off this.
I
But
just did
Okay.
that right versus.
No, that's perfect. So long as folks speak in the mic, the audience should be able to hear fine.
All the other mics are on.
so, Amar is gonna go through this real quick. There's only 5 slides. She's gonna get down to here, and it's gonna kick over to the Excel, this one, and it starts right here at the top, and then we're just gonna go through it. When we get down to this discussion here about the specific area, then the Google map is up, and we're good. Yeah, right click to what's here. So,
And that's what it's, the audience is looking at, split screen.
yeah, that's great.
That's awesome.
And that's based on what's up there.
Yes.
Excellent. How do you, okay, that's how this is up there. Now how do you change it though between, because if I put this up here, that doesn't change.
What's driving that screen?
That's what I was trying to figure out. It looks like this is what's driving that screen. But I can't, can I close it, power?
Close it.
Okay,
There's like a 45-second delay.
yeah. Okay,
Got that, Jackie? How to switch it back and forth?
so when we go, because I think he set it up for just straight slideshow, but when we hit start on the slideshow, it'll pull this up.
Okay.
And then you
There's a second mic is up there.
Make sure it's on.
Mm-hmm.
One's on. But is that one? Yes, it is.
Unless you want to sit at the dais.
No. Not elected officials.
Or over here to the side. All the mics are live. Oh, you're official.
Nope. I'm just not gonna talk. Don't need Jackie being all.
Banging on the computer.
It's not working. It's a good thing. Stand up here. Did you get the email out about 11? Good idea. That's a very good point. Very good point there too. Yep.
All right, I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming to our allocation request workshop. Are you guys excited about 1718 LCTOP? I'm going to do just a very quick overview on what we're going to be doing today, and I'm going to hand it over to Eric. Also, my name is Ahmad Sid. I'm in charge of the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program. Eric?
Eric writes, I have districts 4, 5, and 9.
And then we have Nellie Almazan. She's responsible for 7, 8, and 12. Jackie, responsible for the valley, or down. He's got
10.
6, 10, and 12. And then, I'm sorry, 11. Then you guys have John. So everybody in the northern region, that's districts 1, 2, and 3, you guys have John Thurston. He's on a rotation right now. He should be back sometime in March. So for now, if you have any questions or comments that you need answered by John, you can send them to me or to the LCTOP comments box. One of us will answer your questions. Okay, let's get started. So just an overview of what we're going to do, just very brief program background. Then we're going to jump right into the request, which is kind of the bulk and the meat of our presentation. Very quick discussion at the end and the program timeline. Next one, Jackie. Okay, this should all be familiar to you guys. This is kind of legislation that started the low carbon transit operations back in 2014 with SB 862. We are now going into our 4th year of programming. The intent of this program is to improve mobility, decrease GHG emissions with focusing on disadvantaged communities. Eligible projects are operating in capital assistance. Agencies who have a disadvantaged community within their service area must expend 50% of their funding benefiting the disadvantaged community. Now, disadvantaged community is defined by Cal EPA, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. This should all be familiar. Next, Jackie. Couple updates which are impacting our program this year. Some good stuff. We have SB 32, which extends the life of our program out. So we have another 10 years of funding for LCTOP. We're still on continuous appropriations of 5% of the total GGRF funds. Then we have AB 1550. So this is legislation that we have talked about for the last year and a half or so. This particular legislation impacts all of GGRF. where the increases are set as a program-wide of 25% to meet a DAC requirement or benefit. For LCTOP, it doesn't really change us because we have that 50% requirement per agency or project, if you will. What gets a little bit tricky here is we have an additional 10% to benefit low-income communities. So this is where it gets a little fun. We have two pieces here. If you read it, they sound very similar. 5% to benefit low-income communities statewide, low-income communities or household, and then 5% to benefit low-income communities or households within half a mile of a disadvantaged community. This gets a little bit easier when we look at a map. Unfortunately, our map is a little bit weird right now. We just tried to pull it up and it's not working. There is a useful links in your packet where hopefully the link is just kind of wonky this morning and it'll be active later on. But it really depicts what the DACs are, what the low-income communities are, and then what the low-income communities within a half mile are. Next. Okay, so now moving into the allocation requests. What Eric is going to present, we have a sample project up here. This is just a sample on what you could do, what type of project you could do. It's really an idea for you to see how we want you to write out your project, how you want to tease it out, what's going to be acceptable, what ARB is going to be looking for when we're kind of moving through the process of approval. Within your packets that you have, there should be 2 other samples in there. Again, this is just information so that you can look at and see how to select your different types of projects. There is a useful links page in there where we kind of highlighted some of the maps that you might want to use or some other information referring to CARB, the California Air Resources Board, on their funding guidelines. Also a link to CalEnviroScreen 3.0. So the last 2 years we've used CalEnviroScreen 2.0, now we're on to 3.0. So you may see in there that your DACs have changed, the areas may have shifted, you may not have a DAC anymore, or you may have a larger DAC in an area you might not have thought of. That's something to keep in mind later on. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Eric. If you have any questions, any one of us could jump in and respond to them. We might be answering them in a different section, so we might pause you, or if it's relevant to that particular area, we'll just kind of answer them. But please ask questions. Please engage. This is a time for you to get any assistance that you may need on your allocation request. One more thing, we've all been waiting on our numbers. So just got an email right now from the State Controller's Office. The numbers will be posted this afternoon. So yay, LCTOP is about 96.9 million this year. That's about 3 times the amount we had from last year. So it's a really good increase for all of you guys, and we should be able to do some great things with our projects.
Good morning. As Amar said, we're going to go line by line through the allocation request. However, wanted to start by providing you a little bit of an overview of the actual form. Last year, this form had about 8 tabs across the bottom. This year, we've knocked it down to 4 total, and you are actually only going to be working in 2 of those 4. The GHG summary and the co-benefit summary are auto-populated by the information you put in. You don't need to do anything on them except for print them out and send them with your allocation request. So also with this year's allocation request, there are a lot of smart cells like there were last year, cells that auto-populate, drop-down bars, and some calculation cells. We've also added a new smart cell that goes ahead and it does a consistency evaluation for you to see if the funds are correct throughout your document. So with all of that, let's jump right into it. Lead agency information, this is set up a lot like it was last year. Make sure to get your name, address, and city, state, and zip code. If you put the wrong information here, we're going to send your money to someone else. So let's try to make sure we get this right. The next question we have is about the county that your agency resides in. This is our first of the smart cells. It's a drop-down bar. Select your county. You'll notice regional entity is the same way. It's a drop-down bar. These are in alphabetical order, so find your regional entity. Next, some other simple agency information, website, when your Title VI was approved, and a link to your Title VI. Next up, we have, just like last year, we want to find out information about who prepared the allocation, who the contact person is once your allocation is approved, and who your authorized agent are. We realize for some agencies, this may be all the same person. For other agencies, you may have 3 different people you want to put up here. So moving next into the project summary. We made the project name area a little bit bigger. Please don't use it all. We have to take your projects and get them into an Excel spreadsheet and send all of this information to ARB, who sends it off to the legislature, which means the bigger the name is, the more space that that Excel spreadsheet takes up. So a quick name, a short description. In this area, we do want a short description, not much detail, just telling us what you're trying to get accomplished. There'll be another location to put a more precise, more exact description. Next up, we have some more drop downs for the type of project that you're doing. So is it capital or operations? Once you select from these 2, the next question will be auto-populated for the answers that are available. So the subtype, if you select capital, you'll get this list. If you select operations, you will get another list. I make this comment because we had people not know how to get the proper answers because they were in the wrong category to start out with. So go ahead, drop those down. The next 2 questions is about the lead agency, if they're rolling over funds. If you're rolling over funds to accumulate more money to, I don't know, buy a big capital purchase or do a construction, you're going to select yes. And the number of years you plan on rolling those funds over. This is how many more years. So think of this like, okay, we're going to start the project in 3 years. You'll notice on this project, it's the same as last year, except instead of last year, we were rolling over the funds for 4 years. This year, we show 3 because we have funds from last year. And when I get into the funding plan, I'll talk more about that. So one of our smart boxes is the start date. All projects, unless you're rolling over funds, must start within 6 months of the award date. If you try to put a date that is after 12/31/18, this box will stop you. And it's really meant to because we want to make sure that everybody's projects is starting within that 6 months. So Jack is going to go ahead and show it up there, and you're going to get a nice error message. These are all to make sure that you're completing this allocation request properly before it comes to us. So going to go ahead and fill out the start date. This one, because it's rolling over funds, there isn't a start date. We know that if there ends up being more funds or less funds, you may push the start date out, and therefore, in this case, it would be left blank. Next, moving on to general area and specific area, let us know generally where the project is. It's in this case, Santa Clara County. It's throughout the county. It's not within any of the cities. Just that simple explanation. The next one about specific location, this may seem daunting. However, this is how ARB would like to see the information. They want to see Latin long for your project. We understand if you're doing a bus stop, that might be easy. If you're doing a route, it's a little bit more difficult to provide Latin long. However, that's how we need the data so that we can report it correctly to ARB. And the big thing is also that the Latin long needs to be in the format shown here on the screen, which is not north and south, east and west, but negative or positive numbers. If you have trouble, there's a variety of ways you can get lats and longs. We've seen it be as simple as, hey, I don't know lats and longs. You can go to Google Transit and get them for your bus stops by route. If it's a simple project, you can just right-click on a Google map, go to what is here, and click on the Latin long there, and it will populate it so that you can just copy and paste it into that specific location box. So back to the allocation request. The next question is about project life. If it's a capital project, we would like to see it in the number of years. If it's an operations project, in number of months. We see funding here for the first time. Please separate your money out into 313 and 314 funds. And again, we run across another one of our smart cells, which is a green one, which auto-calculates. The next question is about letters of no prejudice. If you have one approved and the date, just go ahead and put it in there. I'm sure we'll be working with you before that happens, so we'll know if you have one or not. The next section is the funding information section. People who completed this allocation request last year saw this farther back in the allocation request. Because of its importance and a focus that ARB has put on this, it has been moved up to the front and has been grouped with the funding plan to make sure that we get funding information as precise as we can. So you'll notice the blue squares. These blue squares are auto-populating squares. They're pulling the information from where you put it before. If you run across any blue squares and it has the wrong information in it, it means somewhere else earlier in the allocation request, the wrong information was put in. You'll notice this project, it's a $26 million plus project with $400 million coming in, being requested in 17-18, but about $3.5 million in the prior year. You'll notice all of the funding for this $26 million project is shown, and throughout the allocation request, you'll notice a consistency with the numbers. As you rotate down, you'll find the lead agency amount and the contributing sponsor amounts. And this is one of the places where your consistency cells come in again. So I'm really bad with numbers. I've been known to flip-flop numbers. So if, for example, you're there and instead of putting 35, you put 53. Whoop. Undo. See the red cell? You'll get a red cells with strike-throughs saying that this is not consistent with the information that you put earlier on. If you rotate down to, let's say you have a bunch of contributing sponsors and you're summing them up at the bottom and your number doesn't equal the amount that it was up top, again, it will show up as inconsistent and you'll end up with a red cell with a strike-through. As we go back up, you change that back to 35, and everything's happy again. On the funding information pages, as you scroll down, we have two more questions. One about supplanting funds. Everybody knows no supplanting funds. The next is about fully funded projects. Your project must be fully funded once you receive all of your LCTOP funds. Please put a simple description about the funding and where it is in being acquired for your project. And that's all of your funds for the project. It can be that simple of an explanation too. So next up is the funding plan. This used to be its own spreadsheet. You used to have to get it signed. We tried to make it easier by having it right here afterwards, so that both the funding can be more consistent with the funding in the information plan, funding information, and be more precise. So again, you have consistency boxes here. The green ones are calculated. So it's going to calculate from the information below. So you're going to put each of your funding types in here. So as you rotate down, you have your LCTOP funding. It shows all 4 years. If you keep going, this project has some TIRCP funds and some local sales tax dollars. We do want to see that level of information on your funding. Some of you out there go, well, we use all LCTOP funds for the project. Yours is going to be simple. That's all it's going to be. Just the LCTOP for the one place. Next up, by the way, there's also 2 pages of this. I know some people go, that's overkill. You'd be surprised by the number of agencies that fill that out with their project. So.
We've gotten a lot of kickback from ARB where there's a lot of just very small inconsistencies, and so we're really trying to tighten that up here. We want everything to reflect and show a fully funded project, and this is the easiest way to do it, where everything's kind of connecting, and you guys can address the errors where we're not kind of going back and forth with ARB and trying to figure out where that may be. It could be just like Eric showed earlier, a very small flip-flop of numbers, or maybe you didn't fully think about the project by putting in, oh yeah, we did get TRCP dollars and this is a fully funded project. By showing a fully funded project, this gives us some room to kind of fight for your projects as we move forward, whereas if you have errors in a future year, we can talk about that and we can discuss it with you guys and how to show that on your project descriptions, especially documenting it in the no supplanting or other areas of the project description. So just please pay attention to the funding section. It's really big this year.
Yeah, we're not, torturing you guys for the fun of it. We're trying to get as much information as we can so that when we go to talk to ARB about things, we can defend your guys' projects thoroughly. So next up, like I said earlier, there is a full area here to put your project description. We really want the project description here. We want to know everything about the project, not about the benefits, not about how it came to be, but the project. If you're purchasing vehicles, tell us how many you're purchasing, the size of them, the number of passengers. Are you getting cameras with those buses? Are you getting, tell us the full gamut. If it's service, tell us the number of trips. Is it increasing the span of time? How many days? Again, the full gamut of your project. This is the place to provide that information. There's 10 lines for probably about 98% of the projects. Those 10 lines should be all you need. If you need more, please go ahead and copy in a new page, label it project description, and put it all in one place, because you won't be able to see it after 10 lines. Next up is agency service area. One of the things we tend to fight with ARB about is about your guys' service. At times there's not a very good understanding that you know, different transit agencies provide different services for different areas. And so having information about your particular service area, about the fact that you have a huge mountain range that divides your service areas in half, and so you know you have long trips between that service. The kind of demographics, you know, oh, by the way, Siskiyou is a very rural area that we're serving. You know, a lot of this helps for us to be able to explain to ARB why your numbers are a certain way. A big one I keep going back to is Eastern, which operates in Lone Pine. They operate a service called the Lone Pine Express. Their single one-way trip is 59 miles because they're taking people from the Eastern Sierras into Fresno. It's a very, very long trip. Well, ARB questioned us, but having information about the service area helped us to back up the data that you had that they had provided in the allocation request. So, provide a great description of your service area. Next up is, oops, I feel like we skipped a question here. So there's service area, and then there's your service. So how many buses do you operate? How many routes do you run? How many hours of revenue service? Let us know. It'll really help us help you. Next up is agency fares. For some agencies, this is 4.5 pages long. For some agencies, it's free. Please just provide us your agency fare information and how the project will affect that fare. If you're doing a free fare day, we're going to be knocking off $1.50 off of the fare for one day for whatever reason. So next up is project cost. Please provide us the assumptions of how you came up with the project costs. In this case, they're purchasing zero-emission buses. We had a contract to purchase them. We have options to purchase for the next 10 years, and we're going ahead and doing one of those options. The only thing that is missing from here is how much those options are costing. So if it is, we're doing 15 buses and they're $1.25 million per bus, and the charging stations and the installation, let us have all of that information. It'll really help us help you guys. So next up is the project planning. This is a great place to put the story of your project. Tell us why it's important that your agency, how this project came to be conceived from an idea to asking for funding for it. I don't know, bus stop one. Mrs. Smith has been complaining for years that the bus stop outside her house has no shade and no bench. So we've went through the process. We had public hearings, and we're putting a new bench and shelter in at Mrs. Smith's favorite bus stop. Can be that simple here under project planning.
This particular section is really important. We had it in there last year on the allocation request. It's something that all of the climate investment programs are kind of being looked at, how each of these projects really relate to the overall public. And so this is a really good opportunity for you to describe that. Like Eric said, you want to see how you actually did your project. Where did it come from? Are there community requests for it? Was there community concern of safety? Those are things where you can write that in there and really document why you're doing it. You're not just kind of creating a project to create a project. And we have really worked with a lot of the agencies last year to tease that out, whereas we were calling agencies up and say, hey, Joyce, why did you do this? What's going on here? Oh, you know, Susie Homemaker said we need more stops right here and we need a shelter, my children are in the rain. Great, write that in there, document that public concern there, and then how it kind of came to be for your project. So it really kind of moves us into the next couple of sections that we'll be talking about, but it really helps with our program. This is a public program, so these projects get posted, and we have a lot of eyes on how these projects kind of came into fruition.
Any questions? The next question is about environmental justice. This is a question that is in there because of a requirement that was brought about last year. However, we realized that as a transit agency, you are required to do a lot of the environmental justice and civil rights stuff. We just want to hear what you guys, what the transit agencies did to meet that, and it could be a simple explanation. All of our programs go through a vetting process to be designed to avoid substantial burdens. So
this also this section right here is not necessarily attached to the later portion where we're talking about AB 1550 populations, where we're talking about the capital DAC. This is, again, really what Eric said. It's a general planning processes that you guys already do for environmental justice and civil rights. So I just want to make that distinction. It's your overall process and what you guys are already doing.
So the next section is everybody's favorite section, which is the GHG reduction section. The first part of it, you're going to provide a qualitative description of how your project will reduce GHG. Next up, you'll provide a quantitative description, providing values in one section and explanation in the other. I know everybody absolutely loves this section. It's their pride and joy. So I will tell you, though, it is just as important to put value, put the explanation in as it is for the values. If you put a value in and your explanation does not match, it's a red flag, just as much as having a value that is totally and thoroughly incorrect. So a good explanation will help us to fight for your project and be able to back up the information you provided. So for example, with this project, start with year one. That was when the first zero-emission buses are expected to be put into service. A useful life of 12 years makes the end of the project be 2033. Simple description to explain that. Next up is project year one ridership. Again, it says 14,488. If you just put that and put no description next to it, it will get flagged. And it'll get flagged because where did that number come from? Did it magically appear? But as you can see in the description, it is the ridership is expected to increase by 1.5% due to improved reliability, convenience, and novelty of a new bus. Overall ridership was 32 million, and 15 vehicles is roughly 3% of the fleet size. If you go ahead and do the math out, you end up with 14,488. It's important to have that consistency. Next up is the adjustment factor associated with transit dependence. It says transit dependence up there. I like to say transit non-dependence, because what they're actually looking for is how many people you will be taking out of a single occupancy vehicle. And so it is actually the opposite of transit dependence. If you have information that says your express routes remove, a car per passenger, and you have good statistical analysis of it, feel free to make that a 1. If you don't, I recommend using the defaults based on the kind of service that you're going to be operating.
These are defaults from ARB, so
Yes.
it's not a Caltrans default. These are adjustment factor A's that we've had long discussions with for the last 2 years, and so really you want to be able to back up why you're changing the defaults, and there's space right there where you can just say utilizing the default, or like Eric said, you're really going to tease out why you're changing it.
Will there be a glossary at the end to help with the individual like there were in the past or at some of the other grants?
Say that again?
There's a README that's a Word document.
Okay.
That is, the README has some really great information in it. On this, most of the information and description is in the box right above it. So, like, the adjustment factor has the full description there. I'm not sure if there would be much more of a description than that. But the README does have information about tables that we'll get into, and so it is a very important piece of doing your allocation request.
Again, this is California Air Resources Board's language, and so I think we've been doing a great job at trying to convey what they're looking for. The language is standard, so this is attached to the quantification tool, so it's standard across all of the GGRF programs. So it might not necessarily make sense specifically to a trans agencies, but then that's where we come in and we're able to assist you in moving forward. So the description that Eric gave, I'm not sure if we can actually have that printed out for the adjustment factor, because we have to really go off of what ARB is guiding the programs through.
The next box tends to give people fits, and probably the biggest reason is because as transit operators, the way you see this is usually in trip length per passenger. It's information reported to NTD. And so when it says length of average auto trip reduced, it throws transit agencies off because it's not seen that much. But average passenger trip length makes a little bit more sense. This should be based on your project. You may have an average system-wide that is, in this case, 7.56 miles. And if you're making a system-wide improvement, it makes sense to have that length. If you are operating a new express route, and let's say it's a new express route that goes from Chico to Sacramento, this 7.6 miles is not going to make sense for the average trip length, because most of the people will be on that bus for more than 7.56 miles going from Chico to Sacramento. If it makes sense to have a different trip length, explain it. The average trip, the distance between the last stop in Chico and the first stop in Sacramento is 75 miles. We're using average trip length of 75 miles, knowing that everybody who rides this bus will be on it for at least that period of time. It's that simple. Questions? This year we have 3 new boxes that are auto-calculating project useful life, total project ridership, and project VMT. These are more to help us with our reporting to ARB. The 2 blue boxes that you see here, total project GHG and emissions reductions, when you are filling out your allocation request, they will actually say NA. Until you complete the rest of the QM tool. Do not worry about them saying NA until you finish the tab right next to it. And we'll get into that tab real quick. Whoop, nope. If you'll rotate up, Jackie. This is ARB's quantification methodology tool. This year, it is integrated into the LCTOP allocation request, and I'd like to just say you're welcome. You guys only have about 12 boxes on this excellent form that you have to fill out. And the rest of them are auto-populated from the allocation request, and thus are going to be consistent throughout. So we'll go through it real quick. You need to go ahead and select your region and subregion. With region, it's just, is it a county or an air basin? I am sorry that this got labeled region. For most of us, region doesn't mean if it's a county or an air basin. But this is how ARB divides up the state. Regions are either by air basin or county. The only reason you would select air region is if you are doing a multi-county project. Otherwise, just go ahead and select county, and then select the county that your project will be in. After that, you'll see a lot of blue boxes here, auto-populated, calculation of the quantification period, which is the life of the project. The next one up is the service type. You'll have to select the yellow box there. You see the options. In this case, it's a local bus service. Again, a bunch of light blue boxes auto-populated for you. Oh, I should talk about the yes and no's. One of the really great parts about the allocation request is it tells you if the information is required. So as you're filling it out, if you run across a question that says no next to it, you actually do not have to fill it out.
It's changed depending on the information that you are selecting.
Yes.
So your different project types, as you're moving down through the tool, the yeses and nos will change on your projects. But it is really helpful to see if you actually have to fill this information out.
So
That's auto-populated, correct?
yes.
Yeah.
So you just look at it to see if it's there, just if you have accepted previously.
Yeah, so you'll see the yellow tabs like Eric talked about are the selection options, and that's where you're going to be doing your input for your information for the most part.
But all of the light blue ones and green ones are either calculated or auto-populated from the information you already put in. I will mention this that when you select your project and subtype on that first page, it's starting to populate information in here. So if somewhere along the line you change your project type, the boss comes in and says, hey, we're going to throw that project out, let's start a new one. You're going to want to go all the way back to that first page and change that before you go any farther. So in this next section, you're going to select all the information about the vehicle that is part of the project. So in this case, they're purchasing a transit bus. It's not a hybrid, so no on hybrid vehicles. The next one, it's electric vehicle, so that's the kind of fuel it's using. And then the model year. Okay. The next question is also one that we run into issues with. This says annual VMT. This is ARB vocabulary. What they're really meaning here is more like revenue service miles. So how many miles are you going to put on your project this year? So in particular on this, there are 15 buses that were being purchased at an average of 42,000 miles per year. You end up with 630,000 miles per year for the 15 buses. The next one, as you can see, is the white box for annual fuel and energy is there, but it says no next to it, so you don't have to fill that out. And your GHG emissions are calculated for that part of the section, that section. So as you rotate down, in this next section, we're replacing vehicles, so you're going to want to select vehicle replacement. The kind of vehicles, they're transit buses. The kind of fuel, CNG, and the model year. By the way, this should all be consistent with what you've been putting in your allocation request. I didn't read it earlier, but in the project description, it talked about replacing 15 40-foot CNG 2005 CNG buses, so it matches up. The next part is about annual VMT. This annual VMT is the same, should be the same when you're replacing buses as it was before in the section above. Again, it says annual fuel energy. You don't have to fill it out. And actually, we've completed this. All of the rest of the information about funding is already in there from the funding information section. And if you go to your GHG summary, it's all calculated out along with the co-benefit summary tab next to it.
This co-benefit section is new, and both of these summaries are auto-populated, so you don't have to do anything with it. The co-benefits summary is really for CARB annual reporting so that they can just see the different types of benefits that these projects are having. All you have to do is print these out with your request when you're sending it in. So please don't try to manipulate the summaries. You can't really do that anyways. It's really just kind of an overview of what you've already put in.
So at this point, we'll go back to the allocation request. The next section is, oh, by the way, rotate up real quick. So those two numbers that are in light blue will auto-populate once you finish that section. So they used to say NA, and now they are have your numbers in them.
Eric, what happens if it's red?
Oh, yes. This is also a consistency area. If Jackie goes back, rotates up a little bit. Oh, down, right there. Instead of 6,300, put 6,300 instead of 63,000. Or, yeah. Good. Oop. I think we're in the wrong box.
Oh, yeah.
Go up, or put that back to, yeah. Okay, and go up. Oop, oop, no, down one. Was that the box you were in?
Oh,
That's, yeah, it should be down. Yep. We deal a lot with the agencies and helping you to get your projects through. One of the number one ones is if your project does what has happened here, which is provide a negative number, which means that there is not a GHG reduction due to your project. If you get this red box with the line through it, check your numbers. In this case, the amount of miles that we're replacing with the new bus didn't match up, and so you weren't getting full credit for the benefit of your project. We will, like we always have done in years past, work with you very closely to try to make sure you're showing your max benefits so that your projects ends up in the positive. So
there's a lot of different factors on why it could be not providing a reduction, and that's something that you guys would be able to explain as we kind of help you or assist you with figuring out where an error might be. And like Eric said, it could be you put in the wrong number, or maybe you didn't really talk about the length of your trip accurately enough. Like Eric said, maybe it's a 56-mile trip, but you only put in NTD data, and it's just not giving you the accurate benefit. There's a whole host of reasons why your project could be negative, and so we'll really work with you to get it into an accurate positive reduction. It also could be that your project just really is not providing a reduction, and at that point, if you're running into that error and you've tried all the different numbers as best as you could do, you want to give us a call and see how we can maybe assist you in finding a different project, or looking at the community and your planning and seeing what else is out there that we could maybe assist you with LCTOP funding, because again, that's one of the requirements for funding, is it has a reduction here. And so you'll be surprised. We had some smaller agencies that had service, that have an electric vehicle, and they're not getting a reduction. And we've tried everything to figure it out, and it's just, you know what, they don't have the ridership. There's never going to be the ridership for this small community. And so they had to move into a different type of project in order to make it work. But give us a call and we'll walk you through that.
That is what staff is here for. So, our next section is the project benefits section. Real quick description of how your project will increase transit mode share. And then we're going to move on to the co-benefits. Again, check co-benefits that are associated with your project and provide a description down below. This is really your opportunity to describe those benefits that aren't going to be asked about. We're increasing the access to a multimodal pathway from the transit stop, which will increase people's ability to connect between the regional park and the transit stop. You know, let us know. This is the place to really brag about what's so great about your project. And then everybody's favorite section. This is the AB 1550 population benefits section. This last year was called the DAC benefits section. This year, as Amar described earlier, it's no longer just about disadvantaged communities, but also about low-income communities and low-income communities within half a mile of a DAC.
Real quick, since I see the map there, can we take a...
Yep. I've gone ahead and implemented the map. You'll have to excuse me because it's copied and pasted. It's not quite that great, but if you could zoom in on it, Jackie.
This is a map that's included in the useful links. This is a beta version produced by ARB. This really depicts the, as you can see off to the side, the legend. You'll have your SB 535 DAC, what kind of the initiating legislation is for defining a disadvantaged community, as in pink. Then you have like a crosshash, which is low-income communities overlapping a DAC. You have the blue, which is low-income communities. And then that very small orange is the buffer, that half mile of low-income community or households within a DAC. This map, again, it's a beta version from ARB. It's not the official Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, but we do find this very useful in kind of zooming in on your areas and really looking at how to identify the benefits that you're going to be providing to these communities. There is a link. It's on the useful links included in your packets. It will be on our, I think it is actually on our website already. We tried to click on it a moment ago, but it wasn't working. I'm not sure if something's wrong with our service right now, but we're gonna make sure that that's back up and running properly.
It seemed to be that whole ARB website was down. Yeah, the whole
ARB website's not working, but we provided on that useful links 3 different map links, if you will.
Yeah.
I think this is really helpful. We have OEHA, what kind of hosts Cal EnviroScreen 3.0. It's a little bit difficult to kind of zoom in and see your project location area because there's so much data that you can be selecting for.
And the other thing is that the map that Amar's talking about, which Jackie, if you could bring it up on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
It is the 535 there. This map only shows your disadvantaged communities. It does not show your low-income communities or low-income communities within half a mile. And for most of the people in the room, if you'll zoom out and go to Northern California, you're going to find that you're going to have little blotches of disadvantaged communities.
We mostly have low income.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's, but on the DAC map, it looks like this. On the low income map, which is the other map, this whole section's light blue. And so you may say, no, I don't have a disadvantaged community in my service area. No, I'm not, my project is not benefiting a disadvantaged community. Yes, my project is benefiting a low income community. And that's where you would go into, you know, further about your free fare day, providing access to transit to low-income communities, or our route runs right through 4 census tracts of low-income communities. And that map that we were talking about that we had up has that light blue section that you can click and find out more about the low-income community. But yes, I highly recommend using that map, especially for the agencies in District 1, 2, and 3, because a large amount of your communities have low income, qualify for the low income. So
Try to follow those links that we have. If you just Googled Calvary Screen 3.0, you come to this larger map, and it doesn't necessarily give you the most accurate depiction of a DAC. It might extend it out to 70%, making you think that, oh my God, I have a huge DAC section now. But if you click on just the legislation for 535, which is one of the links we provided, you'll see the accurate DAC locations. So don't be so alarmed if you see something completely different from what you thought you had earlier. It could be you're just looking at the overall 3.0 map.
And the best way to describe it is, if you come to the map and the map is dark green through red, that's not the map you want to use. You just want to use the map that just shows the red for disadvantaged communities. And that is the link that we provide. And I do believe on the useful links it even shows a picture of the maps, so that you can see that what you should get when you are going to those links. The maps are actually a very important part of the allocation request and the information we need. As you see with this, I went ahead and copy and pasted a picture of the service area right in. It is that easy. You can go ahead and create a new tab and pop those maps right into the Excel spreadsheet. Or provide them as a PDF in your final document. But please provide maps.
So that AB 1550 map is not a tab that comes with the...
No.
Okay.
It's on the links of the website because the map is kind of huge, and depending on where you're zooming in, we have certain areas like this, Santa Clara, small, easy to see. If you're looking at all of California, the map's kind of huge and bulky.
This is a service-wide project,
Yeah.
so you kind of have a zoomed-out portion of Santa Clara, San Jose area. But if you're just doing one bus stop, you kind of want to zoom in and just show us that particular area.
Or if you're doing a route, you want to show the route and where the area is going. In your folder is an example of a route in Torrance, California, and it shows the bus route going through a variety of disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, and low-income communities within a half mile. So back to the allocation request. One of the important pieces of information we need to know is the census tracts. On those, on both of those maps, the disadvantaged community map and the low-income map, you're able to click on any of those sections, and they give you the census tract number. We need the census tract number as the full 10-digit number, so please provide it in that manner. We had a couple agencies last year provide it as a 6-digit. We thought, that'll work. It's not a big deal. Yeah, ARB didn't like us much. So it needs to be in the 10-digit format so that it matches up with the information in those maps. So
I guess it might not hurt if people understand that what those numbers signify in a census tract. Like 06 means California.
Actually, it's
oftentimes it come with 11 digits.
yes, exactly. So they only want the 10 digits, but yeah, you're correct. This gets you down, all of these digits get you down to a specific point based on the first one being the county, second one being the state, county, region, and then city, I think, or
I think state, county, and census tract.
yeah.
Where do we get these numbers from?
The map.
Jackie, bring back up the 535 map. So here, if you zoom into Chico, for example, there's one census tract here in Chico that is a disadvantaged community. You click on it, the census tract number's up in the corner. It works exactly the same way on the other map that we were talking about. You will have a light blue area. If you click on it, it will provide you the census tract data in the same exact format. Is it coming up now?
No, I just have it in a grant application.
One other thing I'll talk about is, and I don't think I don't think this audience is going to run into this. We have other agencies that have, hundreds of disadvantaged communities in their service area. Instead of using the map and clicking on each individual one, the census tract information can also be found in an Excel version. And we have the document. It's actually, I do believe, a link. But in this allocation request, you can see it says stack census tracts, the tab. And you can pull this information in. This is all the census tracts are available, and you just can go ahead and filter it down to the ones that pertain to your project. I think it probably, for most of the people in the room, will be easiest to just go ahead and click. However, you can use this Excel document. We went ahead and categorized it by county and then by the DAC specification to get all of the census tracts within Santa Clara County that are disadvantaged communities. So, like I said, maybe SACOG when you fill out your application, because there's a lot in the Sacramento area. But overall, it's probably going to be easier just to click on your map. So next up is the criteria tables. Last year, on your allocation request, you were only allowed to use the transit table. We kind of fought ARB quite heavily and got it so that we could lively to a variety of different tables, from the low carbon transportation one to transit to active transportation. They're all available to you. In the README, you will find all of the tables. Those tables are right out of the ARB funding guidelines. I recommend getting to know them and understand them. And if you need help, call us. So you're going to select your table. In this case, it's the low carbon transportation table. Once you select a table, there are further pull down bars that change. So if you select the wrong table, you're not going to get the information in further cells to be correct. So in this case, the next question about the specific AB 1550 criteria. It's letter A. Is the project located within a disadvantaged community census tract? So the answer to that was yes. The next one is talking about the approach as a transit agency you took to identify the AB 1550 community need. I'm very, very sorry for the vocabulary in this. This is, again, a place where we do a lot of translation. This is basically asking, you are providing a benefit to this disadvantaged community. How did you find out that that community had a need? We understand you're probably in constant contact with these communities. Maybe you're having workshops in the community. Maybe it's a common need that these communities have. When you get to this question about the approach that the agency took, there's a full pull-down bar of a variety of different ones, many of which you're probably already doing. Hosting community meetings. I know some agencies have started using the EnviroScreen to determine communities that are heavily affected by diesel fuel, or who have a large quantity of their population affected by asthma because of air pollution. If you're doing that, or if you just received documentation from one of your community members about a project that they would like to support, all of those are ways, approaches that your agency could have taken to find the community need. If you select A, B, or C, the next question will not populate for you. If you did select D, yeah, it won't. You need to go ahead and go through these ARB approved common needs. Yes. Wow. Like I said, I'm sorry. However, a lot of these are common community needs. Hey, we wanted to improve the air quality. We know we have a community. One of them under economics is we wanted to provide low-cost transportation.
And we can only pick one.
What? Yes. That's the other thing. So in this case, they're buying electric buses because they have a community need to decrease the amount of diesel particulate in the air. Hey, we're trying to decrease air pollution. Meets the common need. Once you've done that, provide a description in your own words. I always find it funny because you will say the exact same thing that ARB put, and I want to go, I know that's not your own words. You know? Next up is the specific 1550 benefit. Again, these are benefits as described by ARB in their funding program. I'm sorry for the wording in it. But a lot of these are why you do the projects you do. So in this case, project provides incentives for vehicles or equipment. We're buying zero-emission buses so that the community has less pollution. Next up, in your own words, describe the disadvantaged community benefit, or the low-income benefit, and or the low-income benefit within 3/4 or half a mile of a DAC. You may fill out all of these, and they may be all exactly the same. You may only fill out one. But please provide the benefit that your project has to an AB 1550 community. The last question is about the funding associated with that benefit. I wish I could provide better direction on exactly how this should be. But to start out with, you have to put, if you have a disadvantaged community, 50% of your funding has to go to benefit that community. After that, the next two numbers are arbitrary. However, in Northern California, you may not have a disadvantaged community, and therefore 100% of your funding is going to the low-income community. That is it on the allocation request. Besides providing maybe some maps for your disadvantaged community and where the project area is, you've completed the allocation request. There's one last part to this, which is the signature pages. We separated it out this year. They are all in a Word document, and that includes your authorized agent form, your certs and assurances, and your allocation page, which needs to be signed by your authorized agent and any contributing sponsor. We found a lot of people wanted to have this in a Word format so they could copy and paste it out of this and into a resolution or into a agenda item. We heard you want to make it better. So.
In the last go-round, I think we tried to get it so that our 16-17 authorized agent resolution and certs and assurances resolutions could be carried forward so that we're not having to do those every year. You want us to do them every year?
The big part about we did go ahead and make the board resolution, one board resolution for all three things. But the reason for having it be every year is because there's project-specific information that needs to go on it for you to meet your public participation requirement. And that is one of the reasons we're continuing to say every year for the board resolution.
And the board resolution is certs and assurances authorized agent and
The project part. And we went ahead and just clumped them all together. That is one of the last things that you'll find in the README is a sample of the wording. Again, it's in a Word document. It allows you to cut, paste, and put it on your guys' letterhead. This group has been awfully quiet. No.
If Eric didn't say it already, I can't remember if he did, on our funding section, don't copy and paste the numbers. Please, if you're in the allocation request, we don't want you moving numbers around or cutting, pasting because you break formulas. So most of the stuff kind of is pulled from, a previous section. Let's keep it that way. It's all adding it up. If you're copying and pasting, you're gonna mess up and get red boxes everywhere.
Yeah. And this, actually in the funding plan is where we saw it the most last year, where somebody went, oh, I put those numbers in construction and they were supposed to be in operations. The number got cut and pasted over a box, and all of a sudden nothing calculated for people. That was because of the cutting and pasting. So.
do we have an estimate yet?
Yes. So you missed it. The state controller's office just sent me an email as we got here that our numbers are available. So when I get back to the office, I'll send out a mass email letting you guys all know. They should also be live on the state controller's website probably by noon, from what my contact has said. The estimate for, or the actual amount for low carbon transit operations is $96.9 million. So it's a great amount. It's about 3 times the amount we had last year. You will notice there are about 30 different agencies that are added in. New agencies. Some were removed, but total it's 217 agencies. Last year it was 183.
Yeah, 187,
187, something like that. So there are some new agencies in there.
And so what Mara's alluding to is the fact that the funding may be divided in certain regions a little differently than it was last year. SACOG's a great example of that, where they have an addition of another agency. So even though there is more money, it's not exactly three
Yeah.
times.
It may not be 3 times. For some, it may be more.
Maybe less.
Maybe less. But it's a significant jump from our 34 million that we had last year.
So, and then if you do an air basin,
Mm-hmm.
not a county, and then you're hitting,
You may want to give her the mic.
Yeah, that's what
No.
I'll do.
and then, so basically you're hitting possibly like this intercity bus service that Curtis and Deacon are both talking about, and hit going into Sacramento. You're then encompassing DAX because you go into Sacramento.
Yes.
Okay, and you're so then the 50% of the funding that goes to DAX. Can we just talk about how that works? Like how you like the North State, CERTA, Shasta's, LCTOP, 50% of it goes to benefit DAX in Sacramento. And I guess like walk me through how others are doing it.
That's it. I mean, it's really dependent on the agency. So again, you're extending service down into Sacramento, and you may have, maybe you didn't have a DAC before, and now your commuter service is going into the disadvantaged community in downtown Sacramento. So you must expend 50%, or you must benefit 50% of your dollars must benefit a disadvantaged community. There's no way around that. That's LCTOP legislation. So you must document the benefit. It's a little bit difficult for some agencies to do that, where they have maybe this commuter route that they don't have a general DAC within their service, I guess, area, if you will, their regular service area, if you will. But because you have a commuter service that goes into a DAC maybe really far from your community, you still have to benefit. You still have to talk about that benefit.
And so the benefit is saying that you're taking single occupancy vehicles off the road that are burning fossil
No, the
fuels.
benefit is based off of what we're talking about on the pull downs. You're documenting a variety of different benefits.
Yeah, and what it's going to be is it's going to have to be associated with the project. So if you said, hey, the common need was to reduce air pollutants in the disadvantaged community, then you could talk about single occupancy vehicle reduction and GHG. But all of those tables are what's going to need to match up, not just, hey, that's where our benefit was.
And it's not just the tables, it's throughout the document. So like Eric said, on this particular project, and I don't think we clicked on it in the DAC section to show.
We did.
Oh, okay. I went out. But if you click on your DAC areas or your low income areas, you can see what's
Why
the
they're
burden
low
there,
income.
why they're considered a DAC, why it's low income. And they vary from DAC to DAC. So it could be up here you see a pollution burden, it's pretty high.
Pesticides.
Pesticides is high. Scroll down, Jackie. Groundwater, hazardous waste, asthma, not so much. But when you are in the project that we described, there was a high pollution and high diesel particulate matter. So they're
Go
procuring
to Sacramento.
buses, electric buses. They're going to be reducing the air, improving the air quality, and so that's what they've talked about throughout the project. So you're going to be documenting the benefit, how it best pertains to your project, and there's multiple layers of benefits. It could be where you're providing service to a community college, and now you're increasing time frames. You're providing free vouchers to students, and those are all benefits that you can talk to if that's a burden for that community.
So the burden, the project and its benefits need to be associated with the burdens that are on it, so that you can show. I mean, if for example you had a community let's talk about Northern California, and you have a huge population of low income, you would not say the benefit to a low-income community is that you're reducing air quality if the air quality isn't good.
Right. So the benefit is to provide access to Sacramento and all the resources there. But because we're coming into Sacramento, we now have DACs.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to understand how to communicate that we're addressing. I'll look at what the burdens are for those DACs, but I imagine it has quite a bit to do with air quality, and we could talk about the fact that for those down in Sacramento, we are taking single occupancy vehicles off the road.
And the first step to that would be to be looking at this and saying, yes, that is one of the reasons they're on there. You would hate to say that if they weren't.
Right.
You know, if they're mainly DACs because it's a cleanup area, or, oh, by the way, you're going through a census tract that used to be a airfield, and so they have major cleanup zone. It's a hazardous waste area, you know, all of that. Saying that you're improving air quality, it's not gonna jive, and that's what we're trying to get at. Is the first point is to go here to find out, okay, yes, it's an air quality issue. You know, does removing vehicles make sense for that? You know.
And then I guess quickly, if you can, when you say you guys were able to quickly scroll through that, and since we don't have DACs, you know, we haven't really delved into it too much. I mean, if it's 100, basically, is that when you're like, oh,
Yes.
that's a high burden?
Yes.
Oh.
Anything over 75 is considered.
Percentile, got it.
Yeah.
Can you do me a favor and just scroll down Highway 80 to Vallejo and see what that looks like? You have a map up.
Yep.
And again, you guys are documenting this. We're here to assist you. So we're not going to be telling you how to do your project. We're here to assist you. So give us a call so that we may do that. If you have very hypothetical questions that you want to kind of bounce off of us, and that way we're able to do that.
So if I'm going on I'm putting together an express route in Solano County that actually is going to connect Vallejo and into Fairfield and then eventually into Sacramento. If it's starting in Vallejo, would that work?
Work for what?
For like electrifying the buses that are on that express route.
If it's here, zoom into Vallejo a little bit for me. If it's on George Street and it doesn't go anywhere through there, Georgia Street, that's not in a DAC, and it doesn't go into any of the red areas on your express route, the answer is going to be no.
Okay, but if it does go into the red areas.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I'm going right through the red areas. Okay.
And you have a DAC within your service area.
Cool.
And that new express service that you're talking about having would have a benefit under two different things. First of all, are you providing the service or are you purchasing the bus?
Both, actually. We're consolidating services, developing new routes, and then we'll be purchasing buses.
Okay. The reason I ask is because first and foremost, we'll probably have you split those into two projects. One for the operations. And in that case, the operations of the service needs to have at least one bus stop within that red area. After that, for the new buses, they would be service-wide for whatever routes you're putting them on. And then we would talk about air quality benefits within those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Why would you want to have a bus stop in a DAC?
Does your funding, do you guys, I mean, are you representing Vallejo or that area?
Solano.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, it goes right through. Vallejo Transit Center, the ferry, that's hubs.
Mm-hmm.
You also just to be careful, if you're starting a new route, it's based off of the planning process. It's based off community need, or you're going to be talking about that community need. So you're not just willy-nilly putting a bus stop just because it's in a DAC area or not in a DAC area. You want to be very careful about how you're talking about that. This is very public funds. And so we want to be very, very careful about documenting the need correctly. It's not necessarily to avoid service or to avoid the criteria of benefiting or utilizing 50% of your funds to benefit the community. It's you're utilizing the funds based off of the need, and we can go from there. Any other questions? All right, you guys are all experts. All experts. If you have any questions, send us an email. The LCTOP comments should be listed on there. That's our general comments box where all of us have access to it. You can give me a call, send me an email. If you go to...
So the disadvantaged community, does a half-mile buffer apply to that?
No.
Doesn't.
They took the half-mile buffer out.
So you actually have to go through the red area of some sort.
Yep.
Say you've been
So the big distinction between 535 criteria and 1550 is the half mile, whereas before we could count the projects if they were in a half a mile of a DAC, we can count that as the DAC benefit. So going forward this year, it has to be within and benefiting a DAC to meet the criteria. So for agencies that maybe are finding it difficult to do so, maybe you want to break up your funding. Maybe you want to do a 50% where you're doing something else somewhere, elsewhere outside of the DAC to, maybe satisfy what the public need is, and then you're utilizing your funds, for a different project. It doesn't all have to be within that DAC, and your project doesn't all have to be there. You could break it up to a couple different. Say it again?
There's a variety of different ways, depending on what you guys have for projects. It's one of the reasons staff really likes to hear from you. I mean, we do this, and then we hope to hear from you because we want to be able to have you bouncing ideas off us
So for instance, if you have a system-wide project,
Mm-hmm.
If you have a system-wide project, but only a small portion of your service area is a DAC,
It's a system-wide benefit,
Yeah.
yeah,
so it meets the need.
it means it.
You can tease that out in your request. The vouchers, the bus procurements, those are all system-wide, and you can tease it out. There are a couple of hindering factors on the bus. I mean, you're not going to necessarily put an electric bus that only has a very short range on a commuter route. Those are red flags that we'll catch.
And
So
we'll try to catch them before it goes to ARB where they tend to get ugly.
yeah,
So
I would best recommend. Let's see, do we gotta put the timeline up, Jackie? So as of today, the call for projects is going to be open. So you are last week I announced and put up the working document so that you can start working on your allocation requests. I would try to get through as much as you can to the best of your ability, and maybe send us a draft. Maybe we can look it over before it gets finalized. Maybe we see a red flag and we can assist you before it gets too late. I would recommend submitting your requests, your final draft, or as soon as possible before the March 30th deadline, so that if there is an issue, we have already begun the process of addressing it. There was 2 projects last year that didn't get awarded. It was too late. We could not get those projects to meet the GHG requirement, and we couldn't get a project in there that would utilize their funding. So those funds were lost. So if that's the case for you guys, and we're at a point later on towards our deadline where we have to get the project approval list to the state controller's office, we want to make sure that we've already done as much as we could to get an approved project, or get a project that is going to meet the eligibility criteria.
And if you can't tell, we're transit advocates. We push to have you guys get as much money as we possibly can. I'm actually quite proud. Last year we were under 1%, like 0.1% of the funds didn't go to transit agencies. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hoping to have that be 0 soon, because I don't like giving back money. I know every transit agency can use the money. So.
And if you can't come up with a project, look at your neighboring transit agencies. Maybe you guys make your own deals. That's on your own, but you're going to contribute your funds to somebody else this year, and they're going to give you something else next year. Those are all on your own agreements, but that's a way where maybe you don't have a project this year and somebody else needs the funding, or they can definitely utilize it on something else in their community. You guys can have your own creative agreements, but that way we're not losing any of these funds. These funds are up front, so we will have, SCO is going to be releasing those checks to you, or electric payments, by the end of the fiscal year. That's June 30th. So last year, I think that went out between June 27th and June 29th. So, you know, it's a really good opportunity to start, you know, putting these projects to use.
A question about signature pages after March 30th. Is that still a possibility? We don't have a board meeting.
On the board resolutions, I do want the signature pages for, if you know that authorized agent is going to be the signator, just send them in. And then if you have that draft board resolution and maybe the date is April 3rd or April 14th, package your request and have it in by COB March 30th. We will work with you guys to get those in. I will remind you over and over again, we're not sending your projects out to ARB for a review until everything is final. So just keep that in mind. There was some issues last year where a board meeting got canceled for some agencies and it created an issue. Let's not see that. Again, we have the projects due March 30th so that staff has some time to really work on the projects to get them where they need to be before we send them to ARB. Part of our legislation is that these projects get approved in concurrence with ARB staff. So they may be looking at different things that we didn't catch, and we're able to maybe filter the discussion between you guys and ARB. And so we do a lot of legwork between March 30th and when you guys start receiving those checks.
Thanks. And then last question, hopefully, is the staff. John, I didn't see him here, so I was just wondering what your staff is.
So John is on rotation right now, and he should be back in March. So it's perfect time to start reviewing your projects. If he's not back, don't worry about it. All of us will cover it. For now, you can send me an email or give me a call, and I'm taking on his.
He's D2 those things.
Yeah. So John Thurston is Caltrans District 1, 2, and 3.
One last question. The funds are good for how long? 1 year, 2 years?
What do you mean?
Like once we received our funding for our project, do they have to be spent in the next fiscal year, or do we have 2 fiscal years? What's the length of time that we have to spend the money?
You have 4 fiscal years.
Okay.
It's also dependent on your project.
See, and that's where it gets fun. So if you were, for example, did a rollover project, and you were letting us know we're planning on rolling the funds over for 4 years, you would roll them over, and when you got to the end, you would have 4 years to expend all of those funds from the last date. So rollover really isn't the same as like the FTA version of rollover. It just means that you're rolling back the clock on when you have to spend them by.
What about for operations?
For operations, it's 4 years. I'm hoping you'll probably use them quicker than that.
But yeah, and it's really dependent on how you write your project. So for you know, and that's something we can guide you through. But for the most part, we want to see an operations project be a 1 year cycle. It could be however many years you want, but if it's going to be for 1 fiscal year, we want to see 1 fiscal year so that you have at least, if it's starting today, you have 5 years to do that. And if you change up your project or timing your project, it kind of starts the clock over as what's considered new again.
And that's probably something we should get into. A service is considered new, and it's a requirement that the service be new or enhanced, which basically means the same thing. You change something and it's a new service. That new category only works for 5 years. It's 5 years from the date that you started. So if you are running a new express line, it sounds like you're changing up the way the service has been ran. It might be still Route 30, but you have 4 new stops or something like that. Let's say that starts July 1st of 18, you have 5 years, and I'm trying to do the math in my head, and it's not working this morning. So you have
23.
until, the 2023. And then it's not new anymore. So, however, let's say you decide to reroute it and add a 4th bus stop.
Or now you're increasing frequency.
Or changing the span of time.
Or you're adding a night service or a Saturday loop. Those all could be considered new and expanded.
And yes, that's how staff helps you with your projects. So please.
Maximize the benefit.
Yes.
Okay, I have a question on the funding plan worksheet. So you want us to list out all of the funding sources. I'm on the.
Yep.
So
As it pertains to your project.
As it pertains to the project. So like we're doing a commuter express route, and we went out to seek funding for capital through the TRRCP.
Ooh, real quickly. What are you applying for to LCTOP?
Operating
Okay.
costs. Yes, we're not doing capital, we're doing operating.
Okay.
So do we list the TRRCP?
No.
Okay.
No, because that's a capital expenditure. It isn't to pay for the operations. Now.
And you want them separate, like you use, like the other example. If you're doing a project and there's capital and operating, submit 2 projects.
Exactly. Now, the only caveat, and I'm
gets
glad
tricky.
you brought this up because we were going to probably have a discussion with you about this. If in your capital grant to TIRCP, you took full credit for all of the emissions reductions due to the operations of that service, you can't double count them. And thus, LCTOP would not be able to fund the operations of that service because there wouldn't be any GHG reduction associated with it.
Because if you were awarded TRCP if you were awarded your grant for TRCP, you're taking that full benefit.
Of the type of vehicle or capital.
Well,
It all depends on how you wrote your project.
And how you took credit for the GHG reduction. So if you said, hey, we're operating new clean buses for 63,000 miles instead of 1,000 miles instead of running diesel buses for 63,000, then you didn't talk about the operations at all. You didn't take credit for new ridership. You didn't take credit for any of that. So your GHG reduction would not include service.
Mm-hmm.
However, some people don't do it that way. Some people take credit for the full operation through the capital procurement. And so, great example is, hey, we just built a brand new rail line. The rail line is going to have 300,000 passengers on it, and they're all going 7.5 miles. We just took credit for all of them for the next 50 years.
But even that service is not necessarily paying for the operations.
Correct.
But the project is taking a benefit for it.
Taking credit
And
for the benefit.
That's where we get into, that's where it gets a little bit tricky for us. We get 5% annual apportionment for GGRF. TRCP gets 10%. And
Plus SB1.
Plus SB1. So it gets a little bit tricky on who's involved, who's looking at these projects, and maybe you want to say it gets political, but for LCTOP, we're gonna see that. It's gonna get flagged if you did take the benefit on TRCP or any other GGRF program. If you did something and you provided all the operations on an ATP project, an active transportation project, our funding would be impacted if that's what you were also trying to do to claim a reduction. Because ARB is heavily involved in reviewing our requests and making sure that we have a concurrent agreement on what gets approved.
Okay,
That's
so
true
you're
with the-
basically looking at the wording because in the TRCP you still have a GHG tool in
Yeah,
there
so-
where you have to
so
list
all
out
the
the
GRF
passengers and
all the GGRF programs have a tool, and you're going to be utilizing the tool maybe the same, maybe a little bit different, but I'm not just looking at how you worded it. we would, ARB and LCTOP staff would probably be looking at how it was quantified.
So if in your planning summary you said we expect 50,000 riders from this new service, and in your TIRCP report you said 50,000 additional riders going 75,000 miles, then that's full credit for it.
I guess, Michael, so we probably in the same boat. We put it as new vehicles, to purchase, a different type of vehicle. Not that it was new or expanded service. So it seems like the tools should have been mutually exclusive.
No,
because
it's how the agency quantifies the project. It's
using the tools.
Using the tool. Yeah, it's up to the agency to.
With like cells that were required.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
but you can select on the tool the operations, so you're going to be counting operations, or you can be selecting just capital, so you're not necessarily adding in all the service that you're going to be providing on the capital portion. So like on the sample here, Eric is talking about these new vehicles are increasing service by 1.5%?
Yep.
1.5%. That's not taking credit for the ridership that they're going to be pulling once they decide to start a new line with maybe all of these new vehicles. Do you?
Okay. Here, we're all transit people here, so we know that the operations of a service gets people on the bus, but the capital improvements associated also. So when we put a shelter out, it increases ridership. It's not just the operational portion of it. When you put a new bus out, you increase your reliability, you increase the convenience. Everybody loves the new bus smell. So you get more riders on, but it's not the full amount. It's not all of the riders. You're getting an incremental increase. And in this case, we talked about an incremental increase of 1.5%. Now, that isn't the 32 million riders. It is a 1.5% increase of that 32 million riders. So we're not taking credit for the new operation of service. We're taking credit for a very small amount. And that's a very important component, especially with capital, because it leaves something if you need to come to us to ask for operations.
So like Solano had requested or talked about a new express route, and they're talking about the electrification, and Eric said, what are you actually going to be doing? It could be both. It could be requesting LCTOP dollars for procurement or the capital portion, and then also LCTOP dollars to operate the service. You're quantifying them differently. You're going to be talking about the ridership differently. But that's also giving you an opportunity to use the funds a little bit differently. So maybe you're coming in just for the procurement of a shelter, a bus, whatever. Maybe in 4 years, you now need to operate that route with LCTOP dollars. That is something that you could do because you didn't take the reduction benefit from the capital portion.
And this is, it is very complicated, but the big thing about it is that you're not double counting the GHG reduction or GHG benefit. And the reason we say that is because ARB flags it. They will look at a project and say, hey, we've seen this before, or we've seen a Butte County project that talks about, has the same name or same description. San Diego trolley came up. One of my projects, Peninsula Electrification Project, came up, where they had seen it with TIRCP and they had seen it with us, and they wanted to know, okay, prove that they aren't double counting. And that's where we go back to your numbers and go, okay, did we take all of the credit for it over here with TIRCP, or is there?
So with the TIRCP awards anticipated for April 30th and May 1st, right? So why can't I take it?
Well,
for operating.
Well, you probably take one or the other. I mean,
Well, technically, they're not approved, so I see that your point.
but
Regardless of that, my question is, what's ARB's role? And the other thing in this process, and the other thing I would say is I'd want to advocate for increased flexibility, because this audience here is, we're rural transit providers, and it's hard to, jump through all these hoops to begin with.
Those are great points. I would highly recommend sending in comments to the LCTOP box and to the GGRF comments box when they're talking about their funding guidelines. Those are still in draft form. They've been in draft form since May. They were supposed to be approved in December, and now they're getting pushed back. So
Approved by who?
ARB's board. So when we're talking about LCTOP, when we're talking about TRCP, these are climate investment programs. These are funded by the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is administered by ARB. They're tasked with the quantification tool. They're tasked with talking about guidance in the funding, AB 1550, and implementing that. Their guidance navigates how we operate the program.
Bigger than that,
and on the flip side, this room is responsible for delivering successful projects that make sense in everybody's respective community.
And the big
hard.
thing, yeah, and that's why staff is here trying to help and make sure
Right.
that happens. The fun part is it also, and start with your first question. You asked about what ARB's role is. They're the ones bringing the money. So number one. Number two, they have to, for the LCTOP program, help approve the projects. They're an approving party.
Yeah, they're giving concurrent award on the projects. So a little bit different from TRCP, where CalSTA is charged with awarding the projects, and Caltrans is more of a project manager for TRCP. LCTOP is awarding with concurrent approval by ARB. It's a little bit different roles, so they're a little bit more involved. They have ARB staff that are looking a little bit more closely, if you will. I'm not sure how different it is from TRCP, but that's their role with our program. And so you have some staff that may be on the review panel for TRCP, and maybe they already know that Butte or Shasta came in for a project and they're taking that full benefit, and they look at the projects that are coming in on LCTOP, they're going to flag it.
Right.
And so then our job is to come back to you and say, hey, what's the error here? How can we tease out the ridership that you didn't quantify it all for TRCP?
And where I was going to get to was staff is also here to provide that assistance. I mean, we've been assisting the transit agencies to try to get positive numbers and to try to get projects that both meet the community need and meet the regulations of ARBs.
Right, meet the spirit and objective of what everybody's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I thought I was done. Okay, so then you said the funding guidelines that were supposed to be adopted in December, that's where the comments should be made by rural entities. Eric, since you were at that meeting yesterday about the clean transit, innovative clean transit, is that where the comment? Okay.
That's a different, very different. I mean, ARB's huge, Caltrans is huge. There's different programs that are happening all the time. For GGRF, that wasn't a GGRF meeting. That was a general. How do you say?
It's mobile emissions.
It's a
group.
It's a different program. It's a different suggested policy from ARB. That's not necessarily pertaining to GGRF right now. There is a GGRF it's a GGRF comments at arb.ca.gov.
And if you just Google ARB guidelines. Funding guidelines. You will come up to their website, and it's like the third link down where it says provide comment.
All right, one last question on this, because I know my staff, we put in a $33 million grant for TIRCP. They used every GHG possible. and primarily for Solano Express for electrification. So basically, where does that leave me then? Because LCTOP to me is only $500,000. So do I use that for local routes, or what are your suggestions then?
I'm gonna not. I always like to see it. So if you wanted to send it to me, especially since you're in my district, send it to me, and I will pick through the TIRCP application and say, okay, what all is included, GHG wise. I kind of take pride in being able to know. But from what you just said, I would say yes, you're probably going to want to put at least be thinking about putting your LCTOP funds into a different project, because it sounds like the GHG reduction is being paid for, being taken by the electrification. But before we go all the way down that road, send it to me and let me look it over, go, hey, I hate making a comment sight unseen.
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. Our program is not competitive. So you have an allocation amount, you're putting in your project for that amount. As long as you're meeting those criterias that we talk about, you're most likely going to get awarded. For TRECP, it is competitive, so I understand where the thought process is in counting all of the benefit and the reduction, but you also want to just be very careful when you're looking at other funding and it pertains to the same pot. So the same GGRF dollar is not going to get double counted. You can say in your TRCP applications next year you're doing a percentage, or you're only counting the capital portion, so that you're still able to come in for LCTOP or active transportation or housing or TCC, so that you're still able to maximize the dollar on the project.
Or call out our funding as the operational funding.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things ARB is paying attention to, and we're trying our best to make sure the transit agencies can get and use as much of this money as possible.
Yeah, that's super important there, because
We wouldn't have taken full credit.
And that
I didn't mean in LCTOP that it was a required sell. I mean in TIRCP, it was like you had to enter your ridership.
Yeah, but the amount of ridership you could have entered is what we are talking about varying. I mean, on ours, you saw we put ridership up here. I always highly say you'll have to excuse me. I went to war with ARB about the fact that capital improvements increase ridership. The ARB people probably got sick and tired of me sending them TCRP reports about how important capital improvements were. So I'm still big on making sure we nail that hammer,
There's just a wide variety of documented research on capital improvements and ridership increases. And for the most part, when we have our projects that are coming in for a capital award, we have a nominal percentage for the most part. We're highly advising that even when you guys come in, that you're not taking full credit on the reduction benefit if you plan on operating that project maybe in a future year with LCTOP dollars. So we've been very careful with the agencies to put in, a very great number between, it could be 0.25 increase to 5% or 10%, whatever the nominal number is for a transit shelter or new amenities within the bus. There's documented percentages that we're able to assist you with and pointing out where you could find that information, but we're also making sure that you're not going to be hurting yourself in the future by taking the full credit. There's been some agencies where we physically walk them through over and over again, and
they still want to take the full credit.
About how you may not want to take the full benefit on this project, and all the way to I'm sending you an email and you're validating that you're taking full credit for your capital and operating project, but this is a capital project.
And
that's what we want to do, and you know what? Our hands are going to be tied next year or the year after if they decide to come in and they want to operate that service with LCTOP.
And the hard part for us is we don't really have the ability to advise you on your TIRCP project. You know, you may need every single GHG reduction you possibly could get for the competitive program. And like I heard you say, LCTOP's $1.5 million for him. The TIRCP, what'd you say? 33 million. Yeah. So, you know, that's one of those things where as an agency, you may say, hey, I will find somewhere else to come up with the $36,000 it's going to cost to operate this service because we need the buses before. And so it's hard for us to go, you should only use a percentage. Well, you need to be competitive. And so
We understand that.
we understand that. But at the same time, ARB is going to come down hard on our staff when it comes to, hey, wait a minute, you why did you think that this was going to work? And that's why we want to talk to you early about it and say, hey, you know, it looks like you claimed all of this. Let's look for a different project.
Yeah, and you're
Or change the guidelines.
Well, I don't know how you can change the guidelines since a GHG reduction is required and you can't double count the GHG reduction.
Right. But again, this is a rural transit community where, you know, it's just that much harder to deliver successful programs. I guess if we had this workshop before we prepared that TIRCP applications, and we could have been super clear, this is the intent to fund capital here and then fund, you know, whatever operating costs with these
we completely
funds.
understand that. I mean,
And I can't remember exactly what our wording was, but I know we're gonna be flagged, but
Did you mention LCTOP at all?
I can't remember.
Yes, we did. But we only listed in there as far as the operating expenses, because after we partner with
That might
the
be
folks
your
at
saving grace.
TRCP, yeah, they wanted to know the full funding,
Right.
the full
Yeah.
funding for
That's
the
understandable.
project.
And if the full funding for the whole project's in there and LCTOP's included,
It is.
there, depending on how it's included,
Right.
it may work.
Okay.
I would say like that was probably in the narrative, not necessarily in the quantification.
Tool. And
Well,
see, this is all the kind of stuff that, you know, we warn you about now, but what we really want to do is have you send it to us and go, hey, we have ability to fight this or
work with you.
work with you on it. So, because we understand exactly what you're saying about you know, rural agencies and, you know, everything associated with the difficulties on that. The hard part is, at the end of the day, it has to meet the legal ones too, because we have advocacy
we have legal
groups.
requirements that we
Yeah.
have to meet. We have advocacy groups that are hammering us for almost every single capital
Days.
project that's awarded. So it's not necessarily
projects.
just ARB satisfaction. We have a very public body that's looking at LCTOP.
Yeah. I think we're gonna require a sit down just to go over everything, just to make sure everything's on the up and up and everybody's okay with our project.
Other questions?
That's good, for great feedback for future grant applications to be aware of. Information I wish I would have known 6 months ago.
Great, thank you.
Have a good one, y'all.
I do want to get your card though.
Yes. And then is there any way also, I just started there in October. Liz, you probably knew her.
Yeah.
She's retired.
Yes.
Judy Weeks is retired. So I lost
All my managers.
like the first 3 months.
Question about my
But I know Anthony put together TRCP. He probably
Well, we
has
need
that
to-
space, so I can send it to you.
review all
that
just to make
It
sure
may
we
be a
don't,
little longer, but I feel like
the perception of double
it's different from a lot of stuff.
Well, and then
Yeah, I gotta go
actually, you know, the yellow.
Oh my goodness.
We help you, is that,
LCTOP is heavy looked at and have projects compared to a lot of the other GGR programs. It's a small dollar amount compared to a lot of these.
yeah, it's the Vallejo Transit Center, it's right downtown, across the street is a ferry.
yeah, we
That's it.
are.
Yeah. So I mean, that, they're in the center of the center of community concern.
Send me it. I will be
efficiency and reduce miles of travel to
in the office
determine where our
tomorrow,
dispatch,
Okay.
our
and then I
demand
will
response
travel
vehicles go,
to
as opposed to our dispatchers
Okay.
going,
So
I
I
think
may
that's the
not
best
get
route,
back
or I
to you
think
till
dispatch should do
Friday.
those.
No, but I have till what, March, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
March 30th.
I think it'll work. Have
Um,
you seen
but
it?
Well, I'd have to get to my board March
A little bit different. We
13th
had
or
some of those
14th.
last year.
As long as I get it resolved this month.
Yep.
Your application doesn't look all too complicated. Is there a way to get what I submitted last year?
It's going to improve the efficiency of the bus and hopefully more riders per hour.
You'll
of our
find
demand
that our
response service.
a little different than last year.
Yeah, but at least it'll help me to put what they put for the demographics and everything else, and it keeps it all consistent and.
But for every hour, we
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, and
I
last
used to do
year,
the grant.
well, last year what they did is they gave all the money to Soul Trans and then did a TDA swap.
You know, feeling out as best as
Was,
possible.
but it's like, well, that doesn't actually,
Let's see if we
that
get a number
helps
that's
them.